If the Cuban government had used the money that has been given it for many years, Cuba would be a different country. But we all know that, for example, Castro spent tons of cement building these caves under Cuba cities in case there was an invasion. We all know about the waste of trying to turn the swamps south of Cuba into a producing area. We all know how the Cuban sugar industry, which was the engine of progress, the engine for 200 years, sugar was what made Cuba. The money that was gained by the sugar industry is what made today's Cuba. Yet all that was destroyed. So giving additional funds to a regime that has shown its incapacity to run a modern economy would be a waste of time, and it will be simply saying to Cubans 20, 30, 50 years from now, we're going to spend all this money now, the regime is going to spend it, and you will have to pay. Yes, sir.
I totally agree with what you're saying, and in pragmatics, I mean, it's, if people don't have anything to eat and dress, and I mean, they're going to rebel. But what do you tell the people that, you know, that they just left their mom in Cuba and she's starving to death, she needs medicine?
Well, first of all, it is not, I don't believe that the purpose, I don't believe I ever said the purpose of embargo was to have more misery in Cuba.
No.
The idea of embargo is not to increase hunger in Cuba. If lifting the embargo would mean getting more food and better life for Cubans, I am Cuban, I would be in favor of that. But that's not what lifting of embargo would do. I assume everybody around the table understands that Canada, Mexico, Spain, Italy, the rest of the world doesn't have an embargo. The rest of the world, the tourists go to Cuba. They sell, they trade with Cuba. Cuba has no money to pay. And yet we know what it's like to be in Cuba today. We know about the shortages. We know about getting paid $15, $20 a month. We know about the tourist apartheid. You're talking about a Cuban family in the island who needs medicine. All of us send medicine to Cuba. I'm not against sending medicine or sending assistance to a Cuban family. But lifting the embargo is something else. Lifting the embargo would mean, lifting what's left of the embargo, means that the Cuban government will have access to the World Bank, to the Inter-American Development Bank, and to other sources. And that money, as we have seen in the past, was not used to improve the welfare of the Cuban people. And I don't see any evidence that without a free press, a legislature, and a civil society to demand accountability, that will be the case in the future now. So that's the reason for embargo. For example, I think most of you will know that Mr. Obama made some promises during the campaign on Cuba, and he has been true to those promises. The then candidate, Senator Obama, said that he would lift the restrictions on travel and remittances by Cuban Americans to their families in Cuba. And he has done that. The president also said that he would keep the embargo, what's left of it, as additional leverage. And then he asked General Raul Castro to, one, to release political prisoners, and two, to lift Castro's tax on remittances. In other words, Cuba is one of those few places in the world where you send somebody a care package, send someone some medicine, some food, the Cuban government puts a tax on that. What the Cuban government wants to say and to do is to say Cuba is hurting. Anybody who wants to send any medicine, any food to Cuba, let them do that. Let them help the starving, the hurting people of Cuba. But that's not what the Cuban government does. So that if if somebody wants to lift the sanctions, they have to learn a little bit about what it means. What does it mean to lift the sanctions? What will be the impact? And the only argument that one hears in the Capitol these days is that, well, lots of other things have been tried, they haven't worked. So why not try something else? Well, that's not a very rational way. I don't believe any other economic policy, any other. If you're sick and you go to the doctor and they say, well, we're giving you this, we're going to try something else. Well, of course you're going to ask, what is that something else? That something else might be a good thing or it might be a worse thing. And so far, the argument that just give Castro whatever that he wants or they want in exchange for nothing, that's exactly what the Europeans, what the Spaniards, the Canadians, the French, the British have done. And that has not obtained anything either. As a matter of fact, there are people inside Cuba that would argue that it is because of the subsidies and the trade and the business as usual by those governments that the Cuban regime remains in place. Most of the trade, remember, the trade is not with Cuba. The trade is with the Cuban oligarchy of today. I mean, when a company in Miami trades with Guatemala, they trade with the ABC brothers in Guatemala who grow coffee and they sell it to Miami. They don't trade with the Guatemalan government. Now, this is a different kind of economy. I like to, I don't know if anybody has any questions of this, but why don't we leave them until the end unless it's something quick, so I can move on to the next section. You had a question.
Just the situation with Paris Club hasn't deterred or stopped the Europeans. Aren't there at least some consultants or advisors that would advise European banks not to give any more money to Cuba just because it wouldn't make financial sense?
Some, there has been some of that, but there are always people who believe they could make a lot of money. You know, lots of people buy the lottery every day, and you know that your chances of winning the lottery are very, very minimal. In the last 4 weeks, for example, 15 Spanish companies went public because since Cuba is facing a liquidity crisis, the Cuban government has placed a control on the Cuban bank where the Spanish companies have their money. And so the Spanish companies tried to get hold of their own money and they couldn't get it. And so there's a little bit of a crisis between Madrid and Havana on that issue. So that if an American company wants to trade with Cuba and as they do today, get cash. The way it works now, the Cuban government wants to buy something, they could buy it, but they have to pay for it. Now that's a good deal.